Dr. Peter Abrams, how are you, sir?
Good, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for making the time, man. I really appreciate it. I heard about you from other people with regard to, I have a gluten intolerance, right? And people, I mentioned it on the show like years ago, and somebody reached out like, "Hey, man, we worked with Dr. Peter Abrams. He did a really good job. Like my son had this gluten, sensitivity, allergy, and like he cured him of it." I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." So I've been wanting to reach out to you for some time. But I recently went overseas. I was gifted a trip. I'm not some bougie guy, but I was gifted a trip and I went and dude, I ate all of it. Like I ate all the bread in Europe. I mean, like I'm surprised there was any pizza left for the Italians. I went so hard and I had no problem. And I was like, dude, I've heard about this. What is it? So I come back. And I literally had been hearing from everyone like, oh, it's the heirloom wheat. It's the, it's special wheat. It's like European wheat. And my wife at one point actually bought this like organic heirloom wheat, like, all this. And I get a hold of Brittany Hurst, right, from the Idaho Wheat Commission. 99% sure. It doesn't matter. But the point is, the gal who runs the Idaho Wheat Commission, and I have her in because I was actually trying to find out about barge shipment mechanisms, right? Because we barge transport a lot of wheat from northern Idaho, a huge amount, in fact, and that barge system obviously has to have dams in place. You have to have locks. It's like this whole big thing. So I wanted to understand it. And I asked her, I'm like, hey, what about the heirloom wheat? And you know what she says? She was like, it's a lie. I was like, after I put the top of my head back on, because I was like, couldn't believe, I was like, what do you mean it's a lie? She's like, it's just marketing. They import wheat, they being like Italy, right? Where I happen to go. She was like, Italy imports wheat from them. It's the same wheat. It's a difference in processing. I was like, there's no way. This entered your conversation where I'm like, hey, Dr. Abrams, I'm Matt, and I'm going to get to the bottom of she said in the email, like, she said it was this. And you're like, yeah, she's right. So look, what is it about? Let's just start with wheat. What is it about wheat that we can ship our wheat from the United States to Italy and something happens in Italy that allows me to eat all the pizza, all the focaccia, all the pasta there, and I can't do that with the exact same wheat here? Help me understand.
Okay.
All right.
So it's simple processing of the gluten, basically. So what people don't know, they're like, oh, I go to Italy. Everybody, like, there's no gluten allergies in Italy. I can eat everything there. It's a different kind of wheat. They have higher rates of gluten allergy in Italy than the US. People don't know that. The world's leading expert in gluten allergy, Dr. Alessio Fasano, is from Italy, and he's in it because they have high rates of gluten allergy there. And so I've listened to him talk many times, and I've talked to a lot of patients. I've seen this, and what we're seeing is essentially it's when we have an immune reaction to anything, gluten, dairy, peanuts, environmental allergies, whatever it happens to be, our immune system recognizes protein structure. It's a three-dimensional structure. And gluten has its own three-dimensional structure. When you ferment, that gluten gets broken down. We can't eat raw, right? Or we can't eat wheat raw. We have to ferment it. And the degree of fermentation determines what fragments those gluten proteins become. So they become smaller proteins, smaller and smaller. And so
and that's when people talk about gluten breaking down. It's literally a mass of a protein, and then it breaks once, down. And then it breaks again, and then it breaks again. Got it. Okay.
And so our immune systems recognize the smaller proteins and potentially not the big gluten protein or in between gluten proteins. We don't really know, but it's hard to test which proteins you react to. There's tests out there, which we can get into that. It's not very accurate. But what we see is a lot of people say, I can go to Italy and eat wheat. But if you go to Italy or Europe, they make their bread very differently than we do. When we bake bread here, it's all rapid rise yeast and quick and rapid fermentation. And over there, they have these starters, they let it rise, the old world tradition, they let it rise for a long time. And it's how that gluten is processed, how the bread's made in most cases in the bakeries. And so that's why people can eat the bread for the most part. I think it's more nuanced than that probably, but that's a big part. I have many patients say, I can eat sourdough bread here, but I can't eat regular bread. And it's because it's been fermented, it's broken down. Or they'll say, and that might go to be supporting somehow the different types of wheat and the strains, because the protein structure could be slightly different. So your immune system may still recognize some, old world wheat strain versus a different one. And so it's just the structure. It's really just a lock and a key. Do you recognize that? And what we see, and this goes for all allergies, peanut allergies, any sort of allergy, gluten allergy, dairy allergy, is our immune systems can forget that structure. They lose tolerance to that structure, and they all of a sudden don't recognize it anymore. And that's when you have an allergy or immune reaction to it. And so that's increasing. We can get into that conversation. But I guess the point is that the structure is going to be different. If you can tolerate the gluten over there, that structure is different. It's not that it has GMO or chemicals on it. I mean, they use chemicals over there, and so there's, and Alessio Fasano has talked about this. Dr. Fasano, he said, we've looked into this. We use chemicals over here. There's organic wheat here, just like there is in the U.S. And he now works at Harvard, so he's working in the U.S. And he said, we see the same thing over there as we see here. It's nothing different, but people can go. And I'm sure it's the same for people coming from Europe that have gluten allergy. They may come to US and be fine. I don't know. Probably not, because it's still the big gluten. Yeah. But that's what we're seeing as the structure.
So it sounds like then you're saying, look, with the lock and key analogy, you're like, look, as the gluten protein gets broken down through longer processing, right, which is predominantly something that has been done in Europe for a long time. As the gluten protein gets broken down, our body has a higher probability of recognizing and being like, hey man, that's Brad. Like, don't worry about Brad. Yeah, we're good. And that's Steve. Like, don't worry about Steve. But if you don't break it down to those levels where the body's like, oh no, yeah, this is okay. If it's a large, like, combination of, Brad and Steve, whatever dumb names I used, the combination, they're like, hey, I don't recognize that big thing. What's that big thing? Yeah. But if you separate it, there's like, oh yeah, I know that and I know that. So the idea is, as it gets broken down, it's more identifiable by our system. But in larger chunks, it's less identifiable. And that's when you get, like all the classic autoimmune signs, right? Like stuffy nose, or my ears clog up. Or like I start doing this with my jaw instantaneously. I know, obviously stomach discomfort, leaky
everybody's
gut,
different.
Whatever. Yeah.
Everybody's gluten allergy is different too. That's the thing. That's the challenge. Some people don't know they have a gluten allergy because it's a symptom. Maybe it doesn't have any to do with their gut. It could just be migraines. It could be fatigue, could be aching, could be whatever. And so that's the challenge with immune reactivity, is that the inflammation kind of goes wherever. And so we kind of have to just pay attention to when we, eat, but it's kind of hard sometimes. And I think, probably the big thing that I would tell people is, it's not a gluten problem, because if there was a problem with the gluten, if the gluten was causing it, then everybody would have problems, right? So it's our immune tolerance of it. Our immune system is reacting to it. So we can't blame it on the gluten, I guess. Just like we can't blame pine tree pollen. Oh, there's something wrong with this pine tree pollen because I can't breathe and I get, allergies to this. No, it's just your immune system doesn't tolerate it. You've forgotten what that is, and you're creating that inflammatory response. And I think we've sort of demonized gluten. There's books been written about this, grain brain and wheat belly and all these things. Gluten's bad for us, and, lectins are bad for us. And no, these aren't toxins. If you don't cook it, yes, it's a toxin, but we cook it and ferment it and we can eat it. And humans have been eating gluten for millions of years, and whole civilizations, that's their staple, right? And have no problems. Michael Pollan actually has a good, I think it was on Netflix, a documentary on different elements: fire, water, air, and the air was on fermentation. He kind of addresses this in there a little bit, how he kind of looked into this very thing, and he said, yeah, it's the fermentation. The old world is very different than how we bake in the U.S. basically.
I learned how to pig roast from Michael Pollan.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I was an SAT tutor in my former life, and I worked with Michael Pollan's child, and so then they invited me to this pig roasting party, and I was like, hell yeah.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was like 27, 28, and I saw how they did a pig roast, because he also did a big series on, going all around the country and doing barbecue, and yeah, it was awesome. So then I learned how to pig roast from him. So I recently did a pig roast like a month ago. It was fantastic, 24-hour big smoker. Like I made a custom smoker after I came home. Cool. Yeah, super cool guy.
Yeah.
Okay, well then, understood on this. So bottom line is, you are saying, look, it's not it might have something slightly to do with the different strains of wheat, but by and large, it's the process of fermentation. It's the processing of the wheat. And if you take a wheat, like a bushel of wheat, unprocessed, it is bad for us. And it's only through this process that we've developed over millennia of, okay, we can break this stuff down and make it so that we don't get, like, you're not going to eat a raw potato. Like, that's bad. But you cook the potato. I love a baked potato. And ultimately, you have an old world kind of artisan way of handling and breaking down wheat and fermentation, and enter like Wonder Bread and fast paced culture in the United States. It's like, okay, let's get this. Like, the limiting factor is how quickly we can process from a raw bushel of wheat to a product we can sell. And if that took us 7 days in Europe, bro, if we could shave a day off, we could process more. We could make more bread. We could do all these things. So then we started reducing down the amount of time just in American food industry, reducing down the amount of time that we had to manage this stuff. It's like, I would ultimately like it if I got a bushel of wheat in and then 2 hours later, a loaf of bread comes out, right? Like, who wants the 7 day process? Let's do the 2-minute process, right? And that led to less breaking down, less fermentation, less managing of this. That led to larger clumps of
part of the story,
gluten chunks. And that led to more people being like, ow, this doesn't feel good, or whatever the symptom is, even if you're asymptomatic. This is part of the story of why people have responses.
Yeah. I would just clarify, that's part of the story. That's kind of focused on why you could eat it in Europe but not here. It's a lot more nuanced to why we have just allergies in general and why we're seeing the increase. And that's more nuanced than just that fermentation. So I just want to be clear on that. It's not the only cause, as you.
Oh, hell yeah.
Nothing's black and white, but.
I'm about to hit you on why did I develop this in my mid-30s.
Yeah, that's
I was drinking beer when I was 20. It was no problem. Now, if I have a Corona, my face looks like I fought Mike Tyson. Like, I just swell up. The last time I had a beer, my wife, I literally was like, maybe I could get it. And I hadn't had a beer for like several years. I drink a beer at like a rowing alumni night, and I go home, my wife is already asleep. It's like 11 o'clock. I literally had one beer. I was not drinking hard or anything. I wake up the next day. She's like, are you okay? I'm like, I don't know. So let's enter. Why are people getting like late onset allergies? Like why did that happen to me?
Once again, I think it's nuanced. There's many factors that go into it. I think one thing that I see a lot of people general autoimmunity, allergies, any sort of immune reactivity. And there's some pretty clear patterns of stressors. So stress is a big trigger for our nervous system. So when our nervous system is activated, it goes into fight or flight. What we forget is that our immune system is also doing the same thing. It's part of that whole system of defense. And so our immune system has gone into fight or flight. And so all of a sudden your immune system is looking for something it doesn't recognize. So gluten, protein, environmental allergies, autoimmune, collagen, whatever it is, your immune system is potentially genetically programmed to potentially react to. I treat a lot of families, so I see same patterns in families, and it happens at different points in life. And I usually...
So you could have like a familial stress event.
Or just a familial gene that's for rheumatoid arthritis or food allergy, and they all sort of develop the same, a lot of times, very similar symptoms, similar pattern, but at different phases in life. So I look at them and I say, well, why did it start when you were a kid? Why did it start when you were 40? Why did it start? And I start to see these patterns. And one of the biggest pattern I see is stress, whether it's, stress is like waves on a beach, right? We're all going to have stress, but there's some significant triggers for people. Big life changes such as a job change or pregnancy, and things like this, or a loss of a loved one. I had a woman, her husband passed away, and after this, she developed a cough. She had it for 16 years before she saw me. She saw everybody, Mayo Clinic, respiratory, and she's just horrible cough. And I said, when did this start? She said, well, it was after my husband passed away. And I said, well, if it happened after that, it's probably an immune thing it's probably not an infection. You've had this for 16 years. And I said, actually, this was before I started doing LDI in my practice. It was right before I had all my stuff. So I said, I don't have this week, but I bet it's probably some food reactivity. So try cutting out gluten and dairy. She did, came back, the cough is gone. She said, I figured out what it was. It was gluten. I went to communion and I started coughing instantly. And so the stress had triggered her nervous system, which then triggered her immune system. And gluten is a very common...
Right, it's ubiquitous.
It's ubiquitous now. And the question is, why is gluten versus other things? But I think we don't honestly fully know. I guess I have to clarify. We don't fully know about why we're seeing more allergies and autoimmunity. But I think there's some clear triggering events and the stressors, but also... why now? Why? I mean, yes, we have more stress in our world, more. And when I say stress too, I think it's important to think about stress on our nervous system is not just emotional stress. We have to think about it's more strain is probably a better word, but things like lack of sleep, poor diet. I think all of our light sort of stimulation that triggers cortisol response. Cortisol is a stress hormone. EMFs, I think, are part of this. Just all these different things, chemicals in our food that are irritating our body. I think there's a lot of things. And then I would say the other catalyst we've seen over the last really 30 years now is crops and how they're sprayed with chemicals. So glyphosate, especially, this has been now shown that they started spraying crops with glyphosate in the early 90s. So Roundup Ready corn, and then they started spraying wheat in the early 90s with Roundup actually to harvest it, to desiccate it so they could control the harvest it whenever they want, higher yields that way. So they're saturating wheat. So this is probably a big part of why the wheat actually, we don't know, but that's probably part of this. So we've seen these increased gluten allergies and many allergies since the 90s. It's been a sort of a hockey stick up, this exponential. But what we've seen is the highest levels of glyphosate in certain foods is wheat. Wheat actually has one of the highest, and chickpeas actually. But not a lot of people eat chickpeas, but I have a lot of Indian families, they're all allergic to chickpeas. And so you see these patterns and say, okay, why chickpeas for them and not for, well, they don't eat chickpeas. Other people don't eat a lot of chickpeas. The more we see something, so we talk about that lock and key, our immune system, we have, especially under our gut. So this comes to our gut. So part of the glyphosate story is this delivery, gluten and chickpeas. It's the glyphosate is getting into our gut and our systems. And we've, through various avenues and supplements, we've seen it tested supplements and they have glyphosate. It's sort of ubiquitous in our world now. They just spray billions of gallons on everything. And this gets into our tissues and into our guts. And, it's an herbicide. It's killing things. And so it's killing bacteria and flora in our gut as well. And so what we're seeing with microbiome testing throughout the world is cultures that use more herbicides and antibiotics have much less diversity in their gut. And, they can also talk about processed foods and low fiber diets. Like I said, there's a lot of different reasons why, but we're losing diversity in our gut. So our microbiome has this ability, different bacteria produce different compounds to heal and repair our gut lining. And when we can't do that, when we don't have the bacteria to do that, we start getting, essentially like our skin starts to dry out, starts to crack. Our gut lining is essentially like the skin on the back of our hand. We're essentially a hollow tube. And what we see is it starts to crack, and there's been terms for this leaky gut, intestinal permeability. You've heard these terms. That happens to everybody at some point. The question is how extreme and how long. And then once those junctions are open in those gut linings, we get these gaps. That's when bigger proteins like the big gluten protein or bigger proteins can get through that previously couldn't get through. So now all of a sudden we have immune cells sitting right under the epithelial layer, the enterocytes of our gut lining. It's one cell thick, it's very thin. These immune cells are the security guards of our immune system. They're like the bouncer at the bar. If they don't recognize, if kid comes in with a fake ID and bouncer says, hey, it's not
Get
you.
the hell out
Get
of
out.
here.
First time, maybe it's okay. He goes away. But the more he sees that kid, he's going to get pissed off. And eventually there's going to be a fight, right? And that's what we're seeing with food allergies. The more people eat something that is coming through that they don't recognize, the more they have a potential to react to it. And the gluten story, I think, is we have the leaky gut. These big proteins previously couldn't get through that barrier as easily. Now they're getting through. Now you get exposed. I think that's part of the story. And the bouncer doesn't recognize those big proteins. They're not being processed like the small ones that previously got through a lot easier to, it's nutrition, right? So amino acids and all the nutrition we get from foods. And so I think a big part of this is the glyphosate, the increased chemicals and antibiotic use. Also, we use more antibiotics in this country on livestock than humans. And it's not to treat infection in livestock. It's actually to fatten them up. So we're giving, all our poultry and cows just low levels of antibiotics in their feed so we're getting antibiotics, that's getting through in the meat, so we're getting exposed to antibiotics and how that's affecting the whole food system and the chain. It's a big experiment that we're in right now.
This is, like every 10 seconds, I'm like, oh my God. It's like, this is a lot for me to take in. So just hang with me.
I don't know where to start. I'm kind of like bouncing around.
No, I love it. So let's go back to the original. Okay. People will develop allergies to things in seemingly random times of life. Mm-hmm. And part of it could be strain on their system, because when your system, what you're saying, if I'm understanding it is, when your system gets strained, then your system responds to that strain in a number of different ways, hormonal, like all kinds of different things. And one of those responses is your immune system saying, hey, there's something going on that's not good. Let's look around for anybody we don't recognize, because whoever we don't recognize might be screwing with us. So it starts looking around and it's like, is he? Yeah, I don't know that guy. Whereas before it might have been like, oh, it's probably Brian. It's just a dude over there. But then he's like, hey, I really don't know him. So that's when it starts developing this hyper reaction to, hey, there's something going on. We're not happy about it. I'm going to take a shot and say like, okay, I really don't know this. And then boom, like I developed a macadamia nut allergy.
It happened overnight.
Out of nowhere, literally.
The system is a switch.
Yeah.
Which is beneficial in my world, but
and it was when I was
turn it off.
I was plugging through. I was doing this ridiculous like keto whatever, and I was like, oh, I'll just eat all these macadamia nuts because they're just balls of fat, right? So I was literally going through cans of macadamia nuts, and towards the end, dude, the other thing I was doing, this was so dumb. I developed this right at the time when I was doing the keto diet. Now, before that, I ate really healthy. Like I didn't need to lose weight. I was 6'2", 180 pounds, great shape. I like messing around, right?
I do too.
And it's a great time. Experiment. So usually what I would do is I'd have this gigantic fruit and green smoothie. So we had kale, spinach, chard, blend that up, and then a lot of fruit, carrots, blueberries, bananas, strawberries, the whole thing. And it was great. I'd slug it down every day.
Good for your immune system.
Good for everything. Right. Yeah. And as I went to the keto diet, I was like, well, I better cut out all this fruit. But what I didn't cut out was I was like, I'll do the greens alone. So I would take a blender full of kale, spinach, chard, raw, water, and I would blend it down. I would drink it. It burned like battery acid. And I don't mean burned like, oh, it tastes bad. Like I felt it going down my esophagus and then in my stomach. And I'd be keeled over. I'm like, I'm so healthy right now. Like, and it literally was like poisoning the hell out of me. Like that kale did not want
bad for our gut.
Yeah. And then taking a lot of, like you're talking about, there are things that we can cook or we can process that we can tolerate once they're cooked or processed, but like chug down a pound of kale raw and find out what happens.
Yeah.
So I'm doing this whole ridiculous thing and I'm plugging through all of these macadamia nuts. And all of a sudden it's like, I start kind of getting a stomach ache. And then within a day, I'm like, oh my God, I'm in so much, I was in so much pain. It was not accompanied by any, GI. It's not like I'd have to run to the bathroom. It's like, I'm just in pain for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And again, like you're saying, it was like a light switch. So it was, effectively, if I interpret this correctly, there was some manner of stress that I was going under.
Keto diet is a stress.
Yeah.
Keto diet is a big stress runner.
Oh, dang it, man.
I see a lot of patients that this happens after they've been on a ketogenic diet or a highly restrictive diet, because diversity in our gut comes from diversity in our diet. And diversity comes from nuts and seeds and fiber and fruits and vegetables and all this different things, and grains. And grains, there's a lot of fiber and a lot of phytonutrients. Like, this is really important. And when we start limiting, and I don't do ever elimination diets in my practice, because I see a lot of patients that actually makes them worse. And because somebody said, oh, try this and see if you get better. And they actually, all of a sudden, they can't eat anything after this. I have a horrible stomach. I didn't have any problems before. And now, because what we see, I do a lot of stool testing and microbiome. Well, it's not a microbiome test because it's just the stool. We don't look at the whole thing, but we can see evidence of, say, intestinal permeability, leaky gut, inflammation. And I test a lot of these people after doing elimination diets. Yes, some of these people actually feel better because they're avoiding an allergen, but you look at their gut, their diversity is horrible. And it's just like, I can tell, sometimes I'll get a stool test. I'll say, you're kind of like a paleo carnivore, kind of like you eat a lot of meat. And they're like, how did you know? I can see it in your gut. You're missing this whole class of bacteria. It's super low. Like you're not feeding them. And what that does is, especially certain bacteria that produce a lot of butyrate, which is a short chain fatty acid that is fuel for the cells in our gut that heal. If you're low on short chain fatty acids and butyrate, you can't repair your gut and you're going to get intestinal permeability and leaky gut. So a lot of those bacteria, the food for those is berries and greens and grains and, all these different things. They're not fed by meat. They're not fed by fat, and so when people are cutting out all these other foods, they're not feeding those bacteria. And I see it on their stool tests. And then we put them on, you just get them eating. And this is going back to Michael Pollan, if you've read the Omnivore's Development, right?
Yeah.
I love his statement on food. Eat whole foods, mostly plants, not too much. It's simple. That's what we've seen in numerous studies and through history. But now we've come along and people say, oh, I feel better when I only eat meat. Well, that's because you have allergies or something and you're inflamed.
Or the other things you're eating, like the point of omnivore's dilemma, the whole point of eat food. Yeah. It's like, no, you're eating a food-like substitute.
Problem is the processed food.
Right.
It's not the other. Yeah. Exactly.
Right. You're not eating real food because you're so far. You essentially what they did is they took something that they understood to be, something that people could digest, and not even that in some cases, where it's like, no, there's no way, like, this is not a natural thing, right? Like, what's a gummy bear made of, or whatever the hell,
that's a
right?
Great point. All this processed food is messing up our gut.
Right. It's like Jell-O. It's like, no, dude, that's like a horse. It's like, what is it? No, it's collagen. It's from like a pig snout or something. Like, I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, horse hooves collagen.
Marshmallows. Yeah, I was thinking marshmallows. But the point is, you have something that it's like, under no circumstance should you be able to eat this.
Yeah.
But we're going to take this thing, we're going to beat the hell out of it. We're going to do all this stuff, and then we're going to produce something that's a food-like substitute. Now, can you eat Jell-O? Sure. Yeah. Is it going to be the same as you eating a rock? No. Like, you'll be able to get calories from it, but this is not actual food. This is a food-like substitute, right? And that's the point he makes in the omnivore's dilemma, which is like, you need to eat food, mostly plants, and just don't eat too much. And if you abide by those three things, then you need not worry about all of the other nuances that people, he also makes
whether
the
you
point
eat meat or dairy or this or that,
right.
doesn't really matter, but just get those basics.
Right.
That's actually, there's a big study ongoing. It's called the Zoe Project. And they're looking at, there's people sending in their stool testing, microbiome testing, and then comparing it to health data and diet and all these things. And so they're starting to just use AI to process all this, and they're trying to find patterns and what's the proper diet, this and that. The only thing they've really figured out is there's two things they've correlated. I'm trying to remember if it's 20, I think it's 30 different plant species a week or different products, whether it's different. Once you're above that, gut health seems to be better, overall health seems to be better. That's a pattern. There's like a certain number. They were just like, it's kind of weird. There's just this cutoff.
So if you consume 30 different like raw,
or not even raw. It's
excuse me, like virgin, like it has to be a source of plant, like this green,
even
that
like
green,
spices, nuts, seeds. It's actually not that hard when you think about it, but a lot of people don't get that, right? And then the other one was processed food. They're like, clearly the more processed food people eat, the worse their health, the worse their microbiome diversity and overall gut health. And so that's the only thing they said, whether they eat meat or dairy or gluten or this or that, it doesn't seem to make as much difference as long as they have those found. And that's sort of Michael Pollan's point. Real food, mostly plants. That seems to be carrying true through all the studies now so far. And so that's kind of what I recommend to people, is just don't stress about it. Just, eat real food.
Yeah. He had a couple little just things, is like, stick to the outside of grocery stores, right? Like, because in the middle of the grocery store, that's where you're going to find processed stuff. But if you stick to the outside, you're going to hit the fruit, you're going to hit the meat, you're going to hit the cheese, you're going to hit all that's on the periphery, right?
Yeah.
He also had there was that piece about different colors of food. He was like, you got purple, you got green, you got blue, you got all these different things. Like, eat as many different colors as possible. If you're eating some kind of pale, just beige BS, he's like, you're probably eating a Triscuit, something like that.
Yeah,
and that's again, a consideration of like, eat a variety of things. And then the last one was essentially like, if your grandmother doesn't recognize the ingredient, don't eat it. Yeah. Right. Like, if you read a label, it's like, what the hell is that? It's like, ditch it.
Well, that's a good point. Like, think about my grandparents and our parents. Like, they didn't have food allergies. They didn't have, very rarely, even growing up, but they were eating they were eating a ton of these processed foods. You go to the supermarket now, there's 50 different types of crackers and all these processed packaged everything now. And even, plant-based products now, they're coming out, all these plant-based substitutes. Those are extremely processed. Just eat the plants, don't eat plant-based cheeses and meats that are all trying to be like a regular cheese, but you look at them, and some of them are actually getting better, but a lot of them just have all these fillers and things to try to make them taste like whatever the real thing, and
whatever the real thing
is. It's like, no, just eat the real plant.
I have a family member who is like very staunchly vegan for a very very long time, and she introduced me to some cheese substitutes that were like cashew cheese or something. And, again, I like to mess around. Like, if we're close and you're like, hey man, try this thing. It's like, okay, cool, whatever. Dude, I was not right for like a week. I don't. And you had no goof factor. I was like, okay, So I get it, but like if I want cheese, I want like a stretch. I want like a big piece of pizza or something. And yeah, I was not. It was like, can we, if we're gonna be vegan, like there are plenty of cultures that like Indian food. You can eat vegan Indian food very easily. Vegetarian Indian food, like
real food.
Yeah, right. But like, let's not pretend like we're eating a hamburger.
Yeah.
Like get the benefit of the bloody. What was it, the Beyond Burger or something?
Yeah.
Those are dead now, right?
I don't know. I think actually I just listened to a report on that, and they were comparing, the health benefits of, they were basically saying, are plant-based meats worse for us than regular meat or better for us? And they said actually overall in certain tests, they're actually slightly better, but they're not good for us still. And they're trying to, it's like, well, it's what metric, right? And I don't think they're like, I don't eat them. I'm actually plant-based, but I say I'm plant-based, not vegan, because if I'm traveling to Europe, I'll have meat and cheese because that's what's available. And I know, or if I'm out at a restaurant or with friends and they have a good quality meat or cheese or whatever, I'm going to eat it.
Opportunistic.
I'm going to eat real food if it's processed and, made well. It's not going to kill me. I'll enjoy it. I want to enjoy life. Yeah. So one thing I tell my patients is, and this is actually a really important point, is we talk about stress on our nervous system. A lot of people come into a meal afraid of getting exposed to gluten, or is this healthy? They're actually creating allergies by coming in with the fear of the food. So I always say,
like psychosomatic. What are we talking about?
No, that's nervous. It's real. People will have they'll actually, or somebody will say, you have fatigue, so you shouldn't be eating these, or I see this all the time. You have Hashimoto's, you have thyroid, autoimmune. You shouldn't be eating gluten, dairy. You should be on an autoimmune. And they start freaking out about, oh my gosh, did I get exposed to gluten? And all of a sudden they start having symptoms. They'll say, oh my gosh, I noticed now I have stomach aches after I eat gluten, or this. They didn't have it before, but now they actually really have some symptom. That stress in the nervous system has actually triggered the immune system to react to something just like you did, and so I always tell people, it's important to remember that food for humans, one of the most important nutrients is joy. Like part of food is bringing people together. And this is Dan Buettner in the Blue Zones and a lot of the research on this, looking for this perfect diet for these centenarians. Like there is no perfect diet. The perfect thing is how they eat the food, not necessarily what they're eating. And so there's actually studies on this where people eat the same meal in a different environment and they have a totally different response to the meal as far as blood sugar. Mainly blood sugar is what I've seen, and it's how those stress hormones are when we eat the meal and how we respond to it. And that goes also for the immune system. So they had 3 groups. This is in Japan. I don't know. I remember when the date of this was, but they had 3 groups of diabetics. They gave them the same meal. One group sat by themselves eating the meal, control. One group sat by themselves watching a happy, positive movie. One sat watching a stressful, intense movie. The group watching the positive, happy movie actually had improved blood sugars after that meal. The group watching the stressful movie had worse blood sugars after the meal, and then they rotated them and had the same results. So it was really just their stress hormones while they were eating, which was causing their response. It was blood sugars, cortisol, cortisol is their stress hormone that releases blood sugar, like glycogen from our liver. So blood sugars go up. So a lot of people are having issues with blood sugars regulation throughout the day and problems with food because of the stress when they're eating. And I think I have a theory is that I see a lot of people with food allergies. And in residency and med school, I saw a lot of patients that just were unhealthy, diabetes or whatever in my clinics. They didn't have food allergies. They're eating McDonald's, they're eating junk all the time. Nobody ever had food allergies. But partially is they're eating McDonald's because they love it. And
because it's a happy meal.
It's a happy meal, right? They're just like, oh, I love McDonald's. And why would I mean, they have high blood pressure and all that. So that's a different issue. Obviously, it's sure. Not helping that. But they don't have immune reactivity because they don't have the stress. They have, the stress that's triggering it. Most of my patients with the food allergies and autoimmunity, they're the people that have doing everything right. A lot of times their whole life, I've been eating healthy. I've been doing this. I take all the supplements and I do all this stuff, right? And I'm reading all the books about this. And you can tell they're kind of the type A people. They're kind of wound up really tight. And they're basically creating this immune reactivity, this hyperimmune reactivity through that nervous system activation of the immune system. And I see that all the time as I ask patients and I say, when did this start? Oh, it started, when I started thinking about this. They weren't thinking about it until somebody put it on their radar, and all of a sudden it becomes an issue. Not always. This is just partial.
No, always.
Yeah. Everything I say is not 100%. It's just, but I do see these things. So I think it's part of the story too.
There was that. It wasn't until really the early 2000s when conclusive research started emerging on legit the mind body connection, right? Because there was a sentiment through the 80s and 90s, which is essentially like, okay, your mental state and your physical state are completely divorced, right? Like you can get away with having a stressful life, but still be in perfect health. And it's like, no, you really can't. Like you can damage people significantly, the health wise, through inserting, cognitive despair and stress.
It's a big stressor. It disrupts that balance. Yeah. I have a diagram. I'll have to bring it next time or something. I call it the stress immune inflammatory cycle, and has a wheel of stressors on the brain perceives everything the same as far as stress. It's the same neurochemicals, cortisol and adrenaline, all these things, but different things can trigger those responses. And we've seen this through data. One stress is emotional and just day-to-day stress, but people have, traumas, PTSD. So there are all these different things, but sleep is a stress. For me, my biggest trigger for my immune issues was exercise. I was living my dream, ski racing in Europe, like having the time of my life. And all of a sudden I can't walk. Everything hurts. I can't think. I'm tired. I can't get out of bed. That was my stressor. It was this exercise that was too much for my body at the time.
Dude, how much were you skiing?
Not that much. I was training with other people, the racers, and I was training less than them, but it was more than what my body could tolerate. And so part of this wheel that I tell people is we have all these stressors and poor sleep, poor nutrition. There's so many different factors, injuries, but one of the stressors is inflammation itself. So my example is when you have a cold or when you have the flu, you're wiped out, right? You're so tired. That takes so much energy. That's a huge strain and stress on your body, right? I have people with environmental allergies literally can't do anything all summer. They're so tired. They can't get off the couch. We treat them and they're like, I feel great. That's so much energy going into reacting to something. And so this is a wheel. And so that's, my analogy is that's a pie, right? So if that's a pie of stressors, that's dynamic. It's getting bigger, smaller every day, every month, every year. The key is we all have a pie plate underneath that pie. Problem is we don't know what size our pie plate is until the pie is too big for the plate. And when the pie is too big for the plate, that's when the nervous system goes into fight or flight, gets activated. And then for some people at a certain point, maybe right away or later, their immune system can get activated. And we all have a genetic predisposition to this. And I've seen this through just as the work I do, I notice my family, like I have very similar immune things to my mom, my sister and dad. They have their own things and they're very different, but I can see these patterns. And so you see that was just my genetic predisposition that got triggered by my stressor. In that case, my pie for stress from exercise is a stressor. It's a hormetic effect. Sure. You need some to be stronger. Like stress is good, but too much especially if you're not recovering from it. And at that point, it was too much for my body. Probably I was, living in, post-college, saving money on food. We were trying to live cheap. I wasn't recovering with food and, there's probably a lot of reasons, but regardless, when that pie is too big for our plate, your nervous system goes into fight or flight, and then your immune system can go into fight or flight as well. That's where the inflammation from an immune reactivity, whether it's food allergies or an autoimmune condition, joint pain, I treat a lot of autoimmune stuff, various inflammatory immune conditions. That creates inflammation. Now that feeds back into that pie. Maybe that initial stressor. So I stopped training when I started feeling crappy. I was sick for a year. I literally couldn't do anything for a year, even though I stopped training. It wasn't overtraining because I've done that before. My buddy did the same thing and he just backed off and, just went easy for a while. You're an athlete. Yeah. So, but it was very different for me. I backed off and almost felt worse. And the reason for that is when you back off, you don't have that cortisol and all that, which is an anti-inflammatory steroid, right? So you actually feel more inflamed when you don't push yourself. And that's this catch-22. But now that inflammation keeps that pie big, right? So now it's growing. That inflammatory piece of that pie is growing. The other stressor may not even be there. And you keep getting pushed around this wheel. You keep triggering your nervous system. You keep triggering your immune system. And so I had, over the years of being sick, getting, adrenal testing, my cortisol is always high and I'm not doing anything. I couldn't work. I'm meditating. I'm doing yoga. I'm eating healthy. I'm sleeping. I'm trying to do everything right, but I still can't. I feel horrible.
This was you in your 20s?
This is my 20s. Yeah.
Wow.
So this is how I'm coming in with my context of, this is a lot of my learning for all this. And I didn't know what my career was going to be at that point. I was in grad school for atmospheric chemistry, and then I was going to go to med school and then ski career. And then, so I was like, well, now what? And then I got sick and just going through all sorts of different providers, Mayo Clinic, just learning. It was kind of my education. And then I, eventually figured it out, sort of. But it took me a long time to put the pieces together and figure this out for myself. But I see this pattern now for my patients, because I've had patients literally very similar story to mine, even like athlete there. I've seen this, and I'll be listening to the Tour de France, and I hear of an athlete that all of a sudden they can't train. They think that, they're like, well, we think he has mono. We don't really know. And he's achy, he's fatigued. And it's just backed out his training. He just can't exercise anymore. He can't train. It's been a year and they don't know why. And it's the same thing. And we see this, but it's, what is your stressor that makes your pie overcome your pie plate? And that's different for everybody. Sometimes it's just emotional. And so that's where, the mind body connection and the mind, kind of, as you talked about, is very powerful. And how we can, change our immune system and our nervous system through our mind and through meditation. And that can work for a lot of people, but not everybody, because that may not be their stressor. I did a lot of meditation and all these things, and it didn't do anything for me, because my brain, that wasn't my stressor. It wasn't my mind. It was physical at that point. So I think it's important when I talk to my patients, I give them this diagram and I say, you have to kind of figure out what's your stressor. And for me, I'd done everything else, but the part I hadn't been able to deal anything, there was no tool, was the inflammation. And a lot of people, they're the same way. They've done everything else. They're doing DNRS, EMDR, doing all sorts of meditation, counseling, therapy to work on their traumas and stuff. And they're like, why do I still have this symptom? They're working on the gut. And the other thing I would say too is, I'm jumping around, sorry.
No, listen, I'm locked in. I am locked in, man.
One of my analogies is the immune system is like a train on a track. And so when everything's balanced, the train's doing its thing. You're not reacting what you shouldn't do. It's doing what it should. So there's different wings of the immune system. The other analogy is the immune system's like a military, different wings doing different things. You have immune cells fighting cancer cells, you have immune cells fighting viruses, bacteria. Sure. But then there's immune cells that are potentially fighting things they shouldn't do. So that's the immune tolerance that's regulated by the T regulator cells. But in my world, that's what I focus on, is as unwanted immune reactivity to self, essentially, whether it's food. You could say food is self. It's supposed to be in us. We need to eat food. Something derails that. And you could sometimes say, people think, it's all because of leaky gut. Well, that's part of the story. But sometimes it's the stress that pushes it off the track. Those bouncers, right? All of a sudden they start, hey, let's react to that. It's lowering that tolerance. It's sort of security calling down, hey, code red, react to anybody you think is suspicious. You didn't react to before, but now pull them aside and start reacting to them. So it starts reacting. It's the train going off the tracks, going down the hill. You can fix the track. So I have a lot of people, worked on my past traumas. I worked on my gut. I did all these things. Why am I not better, doctor? Well, because your train is off the track still. You can't heal until the immune system stops reacting, because that's causing inflammation. That's either keeping the track on fire, you can't repair it, or that was the bus that hit you. Now you have to fix your broken leg. That's gone. That's done. Now we have to get the immune system back. And that's this part I struggle with for many years with myself, and many of my patients have. And that's where I focus now. And we'll talk about potentially LDI at some point, and how that's this tool that we discovered as a way to actually bring the train back on the track, which people have been struggling for.
And again, just so I'm clear, in your train analogy, you're like, look, you were moving down a path with certain stress load, and it became too much for your train to stay on the track. And that's analogous to like, okay, once you start the immune system, the nervous system response, and then the immune system response, your body goes into the cycle, and that knocks your train off the tracks. You can fix the thing that was the initial problem, which was the stress, but now that you've entered the cycle of autoimmune response and inflammation, and then more autoimmune response, it doesn't matter that the initial problem was resolved. Yeah. You have to get out of that cycle that you keep experiencing. And that's where it's like, okay, yeah, you fixed, the emotional past traumas. Yeah, you fixed diet. Yeah, you fixed all these things. You have to break this dynamic that your body's stuck in. Exactly. How do you do that? How did you do that, if I may ask? Yeah.
So how I did that, is a tool called low-dose immunotherapy. It's a technique was developed by Dr. Ty Vincent in about 2014, around that point. There's been some version of this for a while, but he really refined it to treat autoimmunity and just make it work better. It's a way of promoting immune tolerance to things that we react to, whether it's food, environmental, bacteria, yeast, viruses, whatever it is, anything made out of protein, essentially. We react to a chemical. I treat a lot of people for allergy to hair dye and, anything, literally anything that is an immune reaction. And so he developed a technique to educate the immune system, to teach it immune tolerance. And that's based on our body's innate ability to learn immune tolerance. This is how babies learn immune tolerance. So we're all born with leaky gut. So this is something we also don't know. We're all born with leaky gut. And there's a reason for that, because our immune systems learn through the gut. That's those immune cells, but also through the mouth. We predominantly learn through the mouth. That's why babies put everything in their mouth. This is 15, 20 years ago now, research in Israel where they have very low rates of peanut allergies. They looked at these kids. Why do they have lower rates of peanut allergies than the rest of the world? The reason why they figured out is they give their babies peanut wafers, these bombas, and they give them the peanut wafers. Presumably that's teaching the immune system to tolerate a peanut, less peanut allergies. Because of that, now we've told our parents to introduce peanuts much earlier in life. Problem is, we still have tons of peanut allergies. People are, I've been doing what they said. Why do my kids still react to peanuts? And this is where Dr. Ty Vincent figured out. He figured out it's not good enough just to give the protein at a random concentration protein. You have to be very specific about the concentration of the protein. What he figured out is that our immune systems learn at a very specific, they need to know so my analogy for the LDI, these doses we give, it's a language class for the immune system. We have to know the protein structure, which is the language. So foods, environment, bacteria, that's the words, that's the language, that's French, Spanish. Then we have to know what level class do you best learn at? Are you a level 2 learner? Are you a level 3 learner? Where do you best learn? And that's where the magic happens. When you give that protein at the right concentration, the immune system says, oh, I recognize that. I can see that now. It's not too much where I'm going to react to it. So if you go too high, it's going to react like you just ate gluten or whatever. Too low, it doesn't see it, doesn't get the message. You haven't learned anything.
So you have to see, you just have to not be threatened by it.
You have to not be threatened. So that's the magic. The immune system that's what the T regulator is doing. This is what babies, this is what they're doing, is they're learning from things. And that's where exposure to lots of things when you're a baby and kids and giving new foods and all these things. And this is also the hygiene hypothesis, with all these antibiotic soaps and all these different things. We're just sterile. So our immune system can't learn about these things. We're not seeing them. And all of a sudden, this actually happened after COVID. We're all wearing masks. We're isolated. After this, everybody's just having colds and sickness. It's because we've forgotten what these viruses, and they're just the same viruses we were on before. We've forgotten them. It's like an elimination diet.
Right.
And I see this with people. They cut out foods for a couple months. They try to add back in gluten. Now I react to this. I didn't before, but now I do. Or I react to this food. I could eat it before, but now I can't. Why? Right. Their immune system forgot what it was. It lost tolerance, and now it's reacting. And so we have to re-educate it. And the LDI is teaching it that education. And yeah, so that's,
oh gosh, dude, there's so much. Like, this is a wild thing. And this was kind of, this is back again, referencing Michael Pollan again, that this is back to one of the criticisms he has of the contemporary food and nutrient, kind of industry, which is people, and this was a criticism in the blue zones as well. You had the researchers initially kind of saying like, okay, well, maybe it's this one micronutrient in like this area, or maybe it's this one thing. And it's like, everybody wants to know like, oh, get this one supplement or get this one thing or do this one, have this one practice. And in reality, as they kind of arrived at the blue zone, and Pollan emphasizes like, it's less of a standard calculator equation and more of like a quantum computing. Like, it's a cloud. It's all of the things at once. And, it's this mass of, it's like this dynamic, this dance that you go through with lifestyle choices, with, introducing things, with, context. Yeah. Like, context is the big piece of it, right? So you see, again, from the, if anybody hasn't read Blue Zones, it's a great book, really focusing on, okay, how is it they focused on a world map and they circled in blue the areas where people had the highest probability of surviving to 100. And there was like, you'd have these like backwoods places in Italy where people had like 5x the probability of, and they don't have like great medical care, but like, here are these guys that one person when they were interviewing, we were asking him about his life and everything. He's like 105. Yeah. And he was like, well, what was your family like? He's like, well, go ask my brother. He lives up the street. He's 103. And they're like, your brother? They're like, yeah. They're like, okay, what are the odds that two people in a family in this little village live past 100? Things of that nature. But again, it's everything. It's this combination. It's just like, again, context of your life, context of your food, context of your mental state, all of these different things working in combination.
Yeah, humans are complex systems,
dude. This is
and we'll never
wild.
And we have AI, and the Human Genome Project was this big. We put all this effort in this, and what they came out with is like, we can't there's not much we can learn from this. I mean, what they found is human genes is only 15% of the phenotype that actually happens. We have the genotype, but that doesn't always happen based on the genes. And so, but what they found is what's more powerful is the human microbiome, all the genetic material in our gut, that's actually much more inflammation. There's studies on just changing one gut bacteria, giving a bacteria, and somebody become obese or thin just by changing a bacteria, doing a fecal transplant. Well, not one bacteria. We haven't totally isolated that good, but changing, there are some things like that. But giving a fecal transplant, all of a sudden somebody who's thin becomes obese, or obese goes thin if they do get the stool from somebody who had that basically genotype, that obesity or thin. And so we know it's much more complex than going with weight gain, or it's much more complex than just food in, food out. It's the microbiome, how it processes it, how it interacts with our metabolism, our genes. I mean, it's such a, when you start thinking about, I love Neil deGrasse Tyson's statement. He says, science is a pie. What we know is inside the pie. What we don't know is the crust. But the more we know, the bigger the crust goes. And that's kind of what's happening in the microbiome. The more we've kind of started to do research in the gut, we're realizing there's so much we have no idea what's going on. And it's so complex. It's almost, this is why they're trying to use AI now to try to sift through this. But I think it's an impossible task, I believe. It's just, we have to all be an N of one and just really pay attention to our body and just try things and see how you respond, and within reason, and get more data, different, stool testing, blood work, and just learn about your body. And until we have some other better way to do this, we're all different. But stick to some of these foundations. There's some things we do know, this basics on diet, basis on sleep. I mean, sleep is so powerful, and just community. I think there was a long perspective study. I think it was Harvard that did it on different it's from the war, I think so, but on longevity and health span. And the biggest negative effect on health was loneliness, more so than smoking and things that you would expect, and so they said, yeah, loneliness is worse for our health than smoking. And so just things, community, and that's for the blue zones. Most of these blue zones, they're all eating dinner together. They have a strong, they had the Loma Linda, community, the Seventh-day Adventists, and they have the faith, and they're all community. So that was presumably what kept them healthy.
Right. And multi-generation households.
And just things like that. They were eating an American diet. I mean, they were maybe eating a little better, but, it wasn't like magical food, but they had that community. And so I think there's a lot of factors, but we do have some sort of pillars that I think is, if we, I recommend my patients, just focus on these pillars. Don't get into the weeds of, am I missing this supplement? Do I have this gene? Do I miss this one nutrient? It's like, no, it's
like, did you call a friend today?
Yeah.
Right. Did you have a meal where you laughed with people?
Sit down and enjoy a meal, or were you eating your car, or were you looking at your phone, or, just sit and enjoy a meal, like just be present. And I think there's a lot of power into that. And I think we have to remember that, and it doesn't have to be complicated sometimes. And we're kind of, humans by nature are reductionists. We want a black or white, we want the villain or the good guy or the magic bullet. That's just how we're wired. We want that easy thing. And unfortunately it's not that way. And we have to just kind of learn what's right for us. And little things add up. It's complicated.
It's complicated. That's just part of the story.
Yeah, that's what I tell people. It's complicated.
Listen, man, we've been going for like an hour. I like you're saying, I have way more questions now than I started with.
Pie's getting bigger.
Please come back.
Yeah,
I would love to keep this conversation going, even if we started doing, if you were game to do an episode like on microbiome stuff and, or whatever it might be. Like, this is just, it's so relevant for everyone. It brings up a lot of experiences I've had in my life where it's like, I wonder why that happened. And now it's like, oh, and again, we're told constantly, I don't know that I've heard the articulations like, listen, this is all part of the story, right? Like, these are just little pieces. And again, emphasizing the concert and kind of complex context that these events happen. I just want to hear more about it.
Yeah.
I don't want to take your whole evening.
No,
so please come back.
Conversations. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it is. For people that are interested, how can they find you if they're struggling with some allergy issues?
Yeah. So I work out of Piney Osteopathic, PEINE Osteopathic. We have a clinic, and so I am part of that practice. And so we all kind of do different things. I sort of do a lot of different things. But just my role there is to just get root cause. Like, why does somebody have a symptom, and let's fix it. I'm a problem solver. I'm a medical detective basically. And then Chris Piney is the owner of it, and he focuses more on structural, but he does a lot kind of mind body, and he does a lot of more of the structural side, osteopathic manipulation. And then I work with Ben Prinzing, and he's also joining me with the immunotherapy and, kind of doing a lot of the gut work and just that whole other side of things. So I kind of do both, the structural stuff. And so I have a unique position that a lot of times people come in with pain. They say, oh, my neck pain, I have this neck pain. It must be structural. I've had this for 15 years. They saw some, whatever. Right. Can I get an osteopathic adjustment? I treat them and they don't really respond. And I say, I don't think this is structural. I think this is an inflammatory thing. And so I give them an LDI and they say, oh, my pain's gone. And because it was an inflammation from something. And so
it just localized into that area.
It's just, that's their weak spot. And that's, I can't explain why sometimes, but it's usually a place where you've had an injury. Like when I was going through my things, I had horrible pain in my shoulder. That's why I had shoulder surgery. I had a dislocation, but it had been fine for years. And all of a sudden it was just so painful and it just goes to wherever it happens to be. And that's the mystery of the immune system in the body. It's complex. Why? But we have to look at the pattern. So I'm through my career and my sort of process going through my journey and also seeing a lot of patients, I've started to learn, how do we really get to the root cause? Is this structural? Is this inflammatory? Is it both? And then let's get to the root cause. But the reason my practice has kind of shifted, because there's so many immune related issues now in this world, and it's growing, and that I've sort of shifted my practice towards that, as a focus on that. Cause it's just, you talk to anybody on the street and they've got some sort of autoimmune, allergy, sensitivity, whatever you want to call these. It's all the immune system. It doesn't matter what you call it, celiac, gluten sensitivity. Right. It's all the same thing. I treat celiacs. It doesn't really matter. It's just the immune system reacting. And so, but we're seeing this huge uptick in immune reactivity, whether it's autoimmunity. And that's also, I think, linked into cancer. That's a whole different story. But inflammation and cancer, it's because the immune system's distracted. It can't fight. It can't go kill cancer cells. It's too busy attacking gluten. Like there's not enough resources for the whole military, right?
Yeah, right.
You don't have the energy,
makes perfect sense.
And that's what we see. I have patient, it's a whole nother story, but yeah, so it's complex, but the immune system is really powerful. And when we get it in a balance, that can also be powerful for healing. And
double-edged sword.
Body, the body can then heal. It just takes away that layer of energy use and inflammation, basically, that is preventing the body from healing.
Gosh, man, there's so much. Listen,
I love it.
I've loved every second of this. Let's do this again. Topics abound. If you're game, I'd love to have you back.
I love it. I love all these conversations.
All right.
We're all
Thanks,
learning.
man. Yeah, absolutely. We'll do it again.
Cool.